Hey everybody, I'm Olivia Wiley, one half of the queer cyberpunk writing team who use the pen name O.E. Tierman, and I'm here to support the Center for Disaster Philanthropy's COVID-19 Response Fund. Support your local charities as they struggle to help communities with these challenging times. Under the shelter of each other, people survive. And now that we're talking about making society stronger, let's talk genetic improvement and how to write it in science fiction. Genetic testing, gene tailoring, helping humanity, or not. Genetic tinkering is something I play with entirely too much in The Hands We're Given and its sequels in the Aces High Joker's Wild series. The possibilities of gene tailoring sound great, until you realize that every genetic flaw will become a moral failing. When perfect becomes possible, imperfect becomes criminal. We see it already. I've caught myself thinking, wow, didn't your parents care about that? When I see an adult with crooked teeth. We extol clear skin and lustrous hair. Thousands of trees have died for magazines that tell us that we just have to drink more water, exercise, and eat our vegetables to get smooth skin. They don't talk about how much money the ladies on their covers spend to get it, though. We confuse moral with physical perfection. And in an era where genes can be edited, that may get a lot worse. Those who can't afford or don't want to improve their children will be listed as criminally negligent. And you have to wonder what it'll do to our sense of humanity. Well, some people have to wonder. I have to write. Quick warning, I will be discussing the eugenics movement and its history in World War II. This may be uncomfortable for some listeners. In The Hands We're Given, I've loved playing with the power, the costs, and the downfall of genomic tailoring. In 2155, the year which the series begins in, drugs are tailored to your personal genome, which improves their effectiveness many times over. But your genome is also used against you. For example, the Medical Kavanaugh Corporation has publicly stated its aim is to perfect humanity. Genetic aberration is treated as a punishable offense by the corporation and contracted workers. After all, they're removing future profits by producing children who will have lower productivity. Aberrant, I put that in quotations, children with preventable genetic issues, and the list of preventable issues is very, very long, are listed as cases of neglect. Babies born aberrant to mothers who could not afford gene optimizing are removed from the home under the aberrant progeny policy. For the company's upper management, gene optimizing is compulsory. I explore these issues in writing the character of Kevin McGillian. Kevin was born into a family belonging to the upper echelons of Kavanaugh's management structure, and his genome was designed to the specifications of a corporate board. His brain chemistry and function should have been optimized in vitro as well, but his parents bribed the technicians to leave his mind alone. He treasures the flaws he bears as a result of incomplete optimization. They're his only proof that he's still human, that he still has free will and his own choices to make. He hates the fact that he was designed to meet the standards of a corporate blueprint. He proudly calls himself aberrant, and wears the glasses that show off the fact he's nearsighted as a small, daily gesture of defiance. He detests the fact that he's been manipulated since he was conceived by a corporation that intended to use him. That anger acts as fuel, pushing him on. Sounds like pretty good sci-fi, right? Sounds a little like Gattaca? I'm sure you've read some other books. I've got bad news, though. I base most of this on history. The term eugenics was first coined by Francis Galton in the late 1800s. Galton was an English intellectual and half-cousin to Darwin himself, and his work included statistics, psychology, meteorology, and genetics. Galton's first academic work on his new idea of eugenics analyzed the characteristics of England's upper classes and concluded that they were hereditary. Therefore, desirable traits could be passed down through generations. Galton advocated a selective breeding program for humans in his book Hereditary Genius. I quote, "Consequently, as it is easy to obtain by careful selection a permanent breed of dogs or horses gifted with particular powers of running or of doing anything else, so it would be quite practical to produce a highly gifted race of men by judicious marriages during several consecutive generations. Now here's something else you might not know. The hotspot for eugenics wasn't Germany or somewhere else we associate with master race thinking today. Nope, it was good old USA. The eugenics movement took root in the United States in the early 1900s, led by Charles Davenport, a prominent biologist, and Harry Laughlin, a former teacher and a principal interested in breeding. In 1910, Davenport founded the Eugenics Record Office at Cold Springs Harbor Laboratory on Long Island to, quote, improve the natural, physical, mental, and temperamental qualities of the human family. Laughlin was the first director. Field workers for the ERO collected many different forms of so-called data, including family pedigrees depicting the inheritance of physical, mental, and what they called moral traits. They were particularly interested in the inheritance of quote-unquote undesirable traits, such as pauperism, being poor, mental disability, dwarfism, promiscuity, and criminality. The ERO remained active for 3 decades. Eugenics wasn't just for academics either. It became a popular social movement that peaked in the 1920s and 30s. During this period, the American Eugenics Society was founded, in addition to many local societies and groups around the country. Members competed in Fit Family and Better Baby competitions at fairs and exhibitions. Movies and books promoting eugenics principles were popular. A film called The Black Stork, based on a true story, depicted as heroic a doctor who allowed a syphilitic baby to die after convincing the child's parent that it was better to spare society one more outcast. See, it really isn't hard to think of stuff to write when you have a history book. The English eugenics movement, championed by Galton, promoted eugenics through selective breeding for positive traits. In contrast, the eugenics movement in the U.S. quickly focused on eliminating negative traits. Not surprisingly, undesirable traits were concentrated in poor, uneducated, and minority populations. In an attempt to prevent these groups from propagating, eugenicists helped drive legislation for the forced sterilization of these groups. The first state to enact a sterilization law was Indiana in 1907, quickly followed by California and 28 other states by 1931. These laws resulted in the forced sterilization of over 64,000 people in the U.S. California's sterilization program was so robust that the Nazis turned to California for advice in perfecting their own efforts. Hitler proudly admitted to following the laws of several American states that allowed for the prevention of reproduction in the quote-unquote unfit. The U.S. eugenic movement began to lose power in the 1940s and was completely discredited following the horrors of Nazi Germany. With modern advances in genetic testing, it's important to keep America's eugenics history in mind. Yet, I'm not sure if we can avoid repeating this dark chapter if we don't know about it. That's part of why I've woven the history into these stories that I write. It happened once. This eugenics movement. This decision that some people were unfit, not worth having alive. If we let it, it could happen again, this time more precisely, and with the intervention of genome technology. And then, of course, we get into the fact that every technology has some bumps in the road, some mistakes. What legacy will the first genomic experiments leave? Will we get children who are genetically perfect on our first trials? Or will they appear perfect until they begin to have children of their own, and spliced genes begin to mix into germlines in unexpected ways? By the way, for folks who aren't familiar with it, the germline is the line through which we pass on our traits, sperm and egg. But on the flip side, if we could remove diseases like Cri du Chat and Parkinson's from the gene pool, shouldn't we? What about bad teeth? Is refusing to remove a gene for cerebral palsy or cystic fibrosis tomorrow any different from refusing to vaccinate a kid today? Gene editing is a fascinating and terrifying area to look into and to write about because it walks a fine line. On the one hand, the prevention or the removal of preventable suffering. On the other hand, the pathologizing of untold numbers of issues. What will end up on the list of preventable genetic disorders? That's my greatest concern, and perhaps my area of most intense interest as a writer. The morally gray area of whether we should genetically modify our children or not can be seen as three intersecting planes. Let's call plane 1 the access plane. Who has access to these changes? Ask yourself this when you're writing. Who is compelled to be changed? I think in our popular imagination we see the designer baby trope played out. Class and social power are linked to the genetic alteration. On the other side of the coin, we see lower-class colonists genetically adjusted for their new worlds in the Spin State novels. In my work, poor countries were incentivized to have their children tailored in order to require less food and water in the first experiments. Plane 2 we'll call the biological politics plane. Who gets to decide what needs changing? Ask yourself that as you write. Is it a democratic choice? Is there a bureaucracy? Is there state intervention when there's a perceived danger to society? What's the danger exactly? We already see some of these issues around the world. For instance, what do you do in a country that wants more boy children than girls? And what do you call a disease? In Russia, being gay is treated as a disease. If we start getting involved before the children of the future draw their first breaths, things could get messy. Plane 3 is the plane of consequences. Beyond looking at the implications of such societies, we have to ask ourselves what we're saying as creators and fans and curators of speculative fiction when we engage with the idea that things like sex or gender or orientation are things that can be tinkered with using genetic technology. Today, academic and medical institutions usually act in ways that perpetuate our current structures of power. It's the water they swim in. If people could change genomes in the future to suit, quote-unquote, society, would they genetically manipulate the population to make sure that men are more intelligent than women? Would they unravel and then erase the genetic triggers for stepping outside the gender binary? What would that make us as people? As a writer, it's my job to ask these questions. I need to hold a mirror up to our society and ask it to look itself in the eye. Like so many things, I don't want us to label this technology as wholly evil as writers. Let's not get out the tar and feather kit, as people have already done for GMO crops. There is great possibility in genetic modification. Maybe as a writer, you can explore the other side of it. Explore the fact that we no longer have to kill pigs to get insulin. Explore the fact that one day we'll be able to get medication exactly tailored to each person that won't make them sick or won't have unexpected side effects. But we have to remember as we write, and we have to remind people, science is amoral. Scientific techniques arrive in a box labeled ethics not included. We have to supply those. Let's use writing to remind our readers that we must use gene tailoring technology with the greatest possible breadth of fully experienced life and least harm as the goals. We don't need humanity to be perfect. We need it to be as human as possible. If you'd like to get this kind of hopeful queer cyberpunk on your virtual and physical shelf, my books are available through Amphibian Press at www.aceshidejokerswild.com, on Amazon and through Books to Read. If you want to see more hopeful queer cyberpunk content, come hang out with my writing partner Nonir and I at wildcards1407, that's all one word, on Facebook, or at etierman on Twitter. Right now I'm giving away free copies of the audiobook for Book 1. If you want a copy, go to the link on the screen and snag one. I'm going to be in the live chat if you have any questions or want to discuss this further. I'll be in there from noon to 4 Mountain Standard Time. That's 3 to 7 Eastern Standard Time. Thanks for supporting this fundraiser. Stay safe, be smart, wash your hands, maintain good social distance, stay home when you can. You may be alone, but we are standing together. and we can beat this together.